Welcome back to another Q&A video where I answer all of your laptop questions. You guys left almost 500 questions this time, so I'll do my best to get through as many as I can. But first, just before we get into it, Gigabyte have sponsored this part of the video for me to tell you about their latest Gigabyte and Aorus gaming and creator laptops, featuring up to Nvidia GeForce RTX 3080 Ti graphics card and the latest 12th gen Intel Core i9 processor. The Aorus 17X takes gaming to the next level with a fast 360Hz screen, a 16-core processor, and plenty of room for cooling to keep your games running smoothly. With an amazing looking 4K 16x10 OLED screen and top-end specs, Gigabyte's Aero 16 is perfect for content creators on the go. You can enter to win an Aero laptop with a sponsored link in the description. Alright, question number 1. Do you think the inflationary prices of gaming laptops will go down along with GPU prices that are dropping back down to normal? Alright, so just in case you've been living under a rock, hardware prices have been sky high since the start of human malware. There were a number of factors that contributed to this, like factories getting shut down, shipping getting more expensive, and just all the individual parts that go into hardware costing more money. Oh, and also people getting a bunch of cash from the government and then going out and using it to spend hardware. That combined with cryptocurrency mining going up in popularity because it was profitable resulted in poor availability for hardware. But over the last few months, GPUs have actually been coming down in price, and it seems that you can buy them. Now, I know people were buying laptops to do mining on, but I don't think it was quite to the level that we were seeing with people buying desktop GPUs and building big mining rigs, because it was just easier to do that. It also wouldn't surprise me if the laptop prices don't change quite as much on the desktop side, because just think about all the components you need to build a system like this. I know some companies delayed shipping their laptops because they couldn't get all the components they needed, like webcams or Wi-Fi cards. Combined with the fact that we're still waiting for popular models like Lenovo's Legion series and most AMD Ryzen 6000 laptops, it doesn't seem like this problem has gone away for laptops just yet. But that said, I have seen quite a few sales on Best Buy recently that definitely wouldn't have happened about 6 to 12 months ago. So it might be improving, but I don't think the problem's gone away by any means. Alright, second question. Does RGB increase performance? Yes. Moving on, focusing on one benchmark, everyone loves showing CPU-based Blender results, but no GPU benchmarks. Have you considered also benchmarking cycles for GPUs? So yeah, I do primarily use Blender in CPU comparisons, even though I'm sure most people are probably actually using it for GPU. I do sometimes show the GPU results if I'm actually comparing like two GPUs in a dedicated comparison, but I haven't really considered doing it in laptop reviews, mostly because, honestly, I just think I have too many tests in the laptop reviews already as is. There's so many graphs in there. Now, that said, before I read this question, I did actually have a meeting with Nvidia where they were talking about a bunch of their studio stuff, and they mentioned Blender cycles as a good test for comparing GPU performance. And it did kind of make me realize that most of my content creator benchmarks, so things like Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, DaVinci Resolve, which to some degree do use the GPU, but they're not purely GPU bound, whereas I'm sure something like Blender is. And I definitely have pure CPU bound tests like, say, Cinebench. So yeah, I might add Blender in the future to the laptop reviews. We have actually started testing it, so I'm in the process of collecting data, but I probably won't start sharing any until I've, actually got the results from a few laptops so that I can have a nice graph with a bunch of comparison data. So yeah, I'll probably start including Blender in the content creation section of the laptop reviews, just so that we have something that focuses more on the GPU. Alright, next question. Your most loved and hated laptop you've reviewed? And if you pick one from your past reviews, which will be your daily driver? So most hated review, the first thing that comes to mind is probably the Dell G14. Let me explain, because if you recall last year, I said it was one of my favorite laptops. So last year, I bought the AMD Ryzen 7 5800H with RTX 3060, and I thought it was a great gaming laptop for the money. In some regards, it was better than my favorite Lenovo Legion 5 that year. And I was very close to buying the Intel 12th gen model with RTX 3060, but fortunately, Dell were able to lend me one of those laptops, so I didn't have to buy it. Unfortunately, they sent the 3070 Ti, which isn't ideal, but at the same time, it's like do I spend 2,000 Australian dollars to get the 3060, or do I not spend my money and borrow a 3070 Ti for free? So it might not be as useful for most people, but I wasn't too keen on spending the money. Anyway, what I was getting at is the laptop just blue screens all the time. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. I had a battery test going, so the laptop was just sitting there doing YouTube video playback, and it blue screened like 6 times or something. And when my partner was testing it, it was blue screening during all the applications that she was testing. I'm not even exaggerating when I say it probably blue screened like 20 to 30 times during the review, which is just embarrassingly terrible. Now, my first thought was obviously something here is seriously wrong. So I emailed my contact who lent me the laptop and I sent it back, and they sent me a brand new version, exact same specs. And guess what? Still blue screened all the time. Now, I might have actually fixed it. So I went to the Intel website and got the drivers for the Intel GPU and I installed them. And ever since, it seems to be perfectly stable. I had the laptop running for, I think it was like 24 hours non-stop of video playback, which doesn't sound like a tough task, but I mean, it didn't die, whereas before it was dying all the time. So that's probably the most hated, just because it was such a pain to, like, if you've got a benchmark running, it might be running for like 20 or 30 minutes. And if it blue screens, you've got to start again. It's just, yeah, it's just crap. And the fact that I had that happen on 2 separate Dell G14 laptops kind of tells me that it's probably a more widespread issue rather than something that just happened to affect both of my machines. I'm not too sure, but yeah, that review probably isn't going to be too favorable, even if I am happy with the stability after the updates. As for most loved, I don't know about that. I mean, obviously last year I said the Lenovo Legion 5 was probably like the best mid-range gaming laptop, and I still think that. As for daily driver, I mean, I'm always using a desktop PC, so I don't really need a laptop unless I am traveling, because I actually need the portability. So for the last few years, actually, I've used Gigabyte's Aero series, though that might change soon. If you have a gaming laptop with specs like 3060 and 5800H or 11800H, how many years should you keep it before buying a new one with newer specs? How often should you get a new gaming laptop in general? This is assuming that you want to have newer specs to play newer games at decent performance. So this question had a lot of likes, which I'm basically using as upvotes, and quite a few other people also asked it in other comments. And I wanted to address it because it seems like there's some common thought out there that gaming laptops just stop working or die after like 1 or 2 years or something. The fact is, any laptop should last for 4, 5+ years, as long as you treat it with respect. I've still got my first laptop from 2008, and apart from the fact that the battery doesn't work anymore, the laptop still works perfectly fine. Now, ultimately, if you have the laptop, the best thing you can do is just use it normally, and when it's no longer doing what you need, then it might be time to consider an upgrade. There's no arbitrary period of, after 2 years or 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you need to upgrade. There's nothing like that. So just use the machine as you normally would and decide if you need something new. If you're buying something with mid-range specs like have been listed here, it should last for years to come, no problem at all. Like, obviously there's new tech every year. That's the way it works. There'll be new CPUs and GPUs probably every year when it comes to laptops. And while some generations, like say the difference between Intel 11th gen and 12th gen are quite big, other gaps like the jump between 10th gen and 11th gen were pretty small, and it didn't really matter. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Are good gaming laptops getting more and more expensive? I remember buying my barebones Nitro 5 from 2017 for only $600. Now that kind of laptop would cost upwards of $1,000. Why do you think this happened? Well, you're definitely not wrong, and it ties into that first question I answered about the inflationary issues. So just all sorts of things coming together, like low supply, factories getting shut down, people having more money, inflation going up. Like, isn't inflation in the US 8% or something? So if you just held cash for a year, you've lost 8% of your buying power, essentially. But yeah, I did first notice this, I think it was last year. I did a little guest spot in a Hardware Canucks video, and I had to pick a budget laptop, and I had a really hard time doing it because, yeah, my go-to has been the Acer Nitro 5 for a while because it's around that $600 price point, which is basically as cheap as you can get a brand new gaming laptop. But at that time, it was like $900, which is quite a big increase, like 50% or something. Now, that said, I have looked at the prices a bit more recently, and they seem closer to that $600 price point than $1,000. Depends where you're looking and on sales, of course. But yeah, on sites like Best Buy and Newegg, I have seen some pretty decent sales. So again, it does seem like things are improving, but also at the same time, yeah, we're definitely not in this land of $600 entry-level gaming laptops that are easy to come by, unfortunately. Could also be worth considering secondhand. I did actually recently buy the cheapest laptop on eBay that I could find. It was around $260 US. Now, it has a GTX 1050 Ti, so probably not going to do the best in 2022. And I thought that might just make an interesting video so we can see what a ultra low budget gaming laptop option could do. What is the temperature threshold that is still considered safe? Or is it that until it's not throttling, the laptop is fine? Also, your thoughts on throttle stop. So personally, I don't really care how hot my laptop is running as long as it's running fine. Like when I'm using this to edit video or something, I'm not sitting there watching hardware info, checking the temps. I don't care. Maybe if it was like super sluggish or it felt really hot to the touch or something, I might open hardware info and investigate. But for the most part, I think more people are more paranoid about temperatures than they need to be. Like if my CPU is running 90 to 100 degrees, I consider that safe. Like these hardware manufacturers know what the hardware can run at, and that's why there are limits built in. But like I'm pretty sure, I can't remember what it is for Intel 12th gen, and it differs between the generations. But once like the processor gets too hot, the machine will just switch off if it needs to. So in theory, it shouldn't cook itself, but at the same time, you know, once those parts do get hot, there are obviously other parts on the motherboard which might not be designed with as high heat tolerances. So I guess from that perspective, you could kind of be concerned about it, but I don't worry about it personally. Like, I just don't think that it's my problem. It's the companies who design these machines' problem to make a machine that isn't going to melt, because if it does, people are going to RMA it, and they're going to have to waste their time and money sorting that out. So it's in their best interest to make something that is at least safe under heavy workloads. So while I don't have an issue with thermal throttling, you are also missing out on performance. So it depends how hard that throttle is. Like I have some laptops that will be thermal throttling in a heavy workload, but it's only just slightly happening. So we're essentially still getting full clock speeds and full power limits being hit. But then you might have another laptop that is much thinner, and you know it has to lower the power limits and clock speeds quite significantly in order to not throttle. So yeah, I don't think it's really worth worrying about the temperatures. I'd worry more about the actual performance coming out of the machine. Because you could have two laptops thermal throttling and, you know, one of them still performing pretty well and the other one is performing really bad. As for throttle stop, yeah, it's pretty decent software. Again, I don't personally use it because I don't do any tuning. I just let my machines run however they want. As long as it gets the job done, I don't care. I don't have time to sit here tuning stuff and trying to get the most out of it. I just don't need to. And fact is, most of you don't need to either. Just use your laptop and enjoy it. What is the minimum upgradability one should look for in a laptop? Now that most everything is soldered to the motherboard, are we reaching a point where we should just be okay with the RAM storage and all other components soldered to the board as long as it meets the specs or needs of the user and performs as expected? Well, personally, I do like having upgradability options because it just gives you more options and you're not stuck with something that you have to replace sooner rather than later. Like take the Razer Blade 14 for example. That laptop only has 16 gigs of memory soldered to the motherboard, which is kind of pathetic when you can spec it up to like an RTX 3080 Ti for like $4,000 or something. If you start doing workloads that need more than 16 gigs of RAM, then what can you do? You basically just have to get rid of the whole machine and get a new one. I mean, you're not just going to like chuck it out and send it to landfill, I hope. You'd probably sell it, but still my point is you'd have to go and get something else that does the job you need. I think in an ideal world, most laptops that give you 2 M.2 storage slots, 2 memory slots, and Wi-Fi card upgradability is probably the best you can hope for. Some laptops like the ASUS Zephyrus series are in a bit of a middle ground. I don't think they're too bad because you still get at least 1 memory slot that you can upgrade. And hey, one's better than none, like that Razer laptop. So at least with the ASUS Zephyrus, you could have say 8 or 16 gigs soldered to the motherboard, and then you could install 8, 16, or even a 32 gig stick. But yeah, for smaller laptops like 13 inches, maybe even 14 inches, soldered parts do seem to be a bit of the norm, but I can't see that happening with 15-inch and above gaming laptops. This question comes from a Patreon member, and if I don't answer your question, you can always join Patreon and get in the Discord community and ask your questions there. Anyway, do you expect the AMD Advantage framework to start appearing in more systems only with Zen 4 mobile processors, or is the demand for RTX cards just too high? Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. So, like last year, there was only 1, maybe 2 AMD Advantage laptops. There was the 6800M in the ASUS Strix G14 Advantage and the 6700M in the MSI Delta 15, and there was also the 6600M in the Legion 5. But yeah, this year there are definitely more. The first one that comes to mind is the ASUS Zephyrus G14, but then at the same time, they're not continuing the Strix G15 Advantage Edition this year for some reason. There is also that Alienware laptop that's meant to have a Ryzen CPU and 6850M graphics. They're still coming along, but it's not like there's been a super big increase in AMD Advantage laptops this year. I would expect there to be more with Zen 4 next year, but that's just based on what we've seen so far, which isn't much. So that was a slow start. And then this year, a little more. And then maybe next year, probably a little more. That seems to be how it goes with AMD. So when they had Ryzen 4000 mobile CPUs, if you recall, I think it was like 2020, we only had a few gaming laptops and they didn't go above RTX 2060 graphics for whatever reason. It was kind of like they were just testing out the gaming laptop market. And then the next year, there was Ryzen 5000 laptops, and there was way more options available. Not necessarily Advantage options with Radeon GPUs, but more AMD configurations for sure. And I think those Radeon GPUs just need more, I guess, more market share, more testing. But yeah, they're starting small and working their way up. So potentially next year we'll see more Radeon-based options. I guess it just depends if they're competitive. This generation with Radeon 6000 versus Nvidia RTX 30 series on the laptop side, AMD was actually quite competitive, at least in raw performance. Nvidia is better in terms of ray tracing, and you do get DLSS. Obviously the Radeon card can use FSR, but Nvidia can use FSR too, so it kind of gets best of both worlds. But yeah, I would expect more AMD Advantage laptops to appear. I wouldn't suddenly expect there to be like 10 or 20 options though. Alright, quite a few questions here, so let's go through them. In the Intel vs AMD tech battle, who do you think is winning currently? So I think my video comparing the 6800H and 12700H went out after I collected these questions, so I do currently have that video out now. Basically, in terms of both single-threaded and multi-threaded CPU performance, Intel 12th Gen pretty much destroys AMD Ryzen 6000. As long as we're talking about power limits over, I think it was 35 watt TDP, which, let's face it, is pretty much every laptop ever, unless you've got like a really small, thin Ultrabook or something. In terms of gaming, we have done the benchmarks for it, but I haven't actually gone through the data yet, but that video will be up in like 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks at the latest. So yeah, stay tuned for that if you want to see the gaming differences. What time of the year do you recommend your audience as the best time to buy a laptop? And what do you look for when making a purchase? New tech releases, holiday bargains, market opportunity, etc. So I've always said that the best time to buy a laptop is when you need one. If you need something to do your job, then you're better off just getting what's available now rather than waiting for the next best thing. Now, that said, there are some things that you can do. So generally, there are some good sales around Black Friday, which is kind of November. But if you can hold out a bit longer than that, generally the new laptop CPU and GPU announcements happen at CES in January. But once we get those announcements, usually it's still a few months until we actually start seeing laptops with that hardware becoming available. So again, depends how long you want to wait. Like if you take this CES, for example, Intel announced 12th Gen, AMD announced Ryzen 6000, and there was Nvidia RTX 3070 Ti and 3080 Ti. I don't think we actually got any of those laptops for like 2 or 3 months, and there are still some that we don't have, like the Lenovo Legion 5 and Legion 7. And it's been 7 months since that time, so yeah, it ultimately definitely buy something when you need it, but yeah, there will be new announcements, usually January every year, and then you can usually get a good deal on most stuff around November. Is future-proofing a legitimate concern or just a marketing scam? I don't really think there's such thing as future-proofing. I think you should buy a laptop with what you need. You could buy a $2,000 laptop today and a $2,000 laptop 3 years from now, or a $4,000 laptop today. I'm pretty sure the $2,000 laptop in 3 years from now is going to absolutely destroy the $4,000 laptop today. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Basically, buy the hardware you need at the time, maybe a little extra, I mean, if it's not too much extra money, but I wouldn't go out of my way spending everything I have just to get a top-end model. Who or what inspired you to start your channel, and what other laptop reviewers do you watch when considering your own laptop purchases? So I don't really watch other laptop reviewers in terms of like making purchasing decisions, mostly because well, let's just be realistic. I don't have to because I get so many laptops coming in that I can pretty much try them all out for myself and decide if it's something that I want to use. I don't know. I just really like YouTube. Part of the main reason that I started the channel is because I just wanted to get involved in the tech community, and I found that the laptop area was fairly underserved compared to, you know, all the channels out there focusing on desktop PCs. But yeah, as for what inspired you to start the channel, I think it was like 1, 2, maybe 3 a.m. one night. I just couldn't sleep, and I just thought, oh yeah, that would be kind of cool. And then I just thought of like Linus Tech Tips, which I think was maybe under 1 million subs at the time or something. I can't remember. So quite a long time ago. And I just remember thinking, if this guy can do it, I can probably manage too. Not quite like that, but something along those lines. And yeah, here we are. It's been going pretty well ever since. But even before that, I did always kind of want to do tech reviews. I don't know how long ago it was. It was easily more than 10 years. Probably late 2000s, maybe 2008, 2009. I did actually buy a domain to set up a website to do tech reviews. That was about as far as I ever took it though. I never actually set up the website or reviewed anything, but I bought the domain and yeah, I was interested in getting into it. So yeah, I guess some part of me has always just been interested in looking at different tech, and yeah, glad we finally got into doing YouTube videos. What laptops in today's market do you think are the smartest purchases, best bang for buck, or which laptops do you feel are the biggest ripoffs, overpriced and outclassed by similar competitors? So in terms of biggest ripoffs, I mean, I guess there's like your Razers and Alienwares, but I think those still have a place. Like some people just want, say for Razer, they might be coming from a MacBook and they want something that just feels really nice in terms of build quality. And like I always say, Razer is basically the Apple MacBook when it comes to Windows gaming laptops. So if you want to spend more than that and you're used to spending Apple money, Razer probably wouldn't be too expensive. But yeah, you can definitely get much cheaper laptops that will outperform those because, you know, the machines will be slightly thicker than a Razer, but you'll get better power limits, which equals better performance. As for the smartest purchases, you know, I don't think most people need to go over RTX 3060 graphics. 3070 Ti maybe is the highest I'd go. I can't recommend going for 3080 Ti unless you like really need that extra VRAM for like 3D modeling or something, because I've shown many times in the past that 3070 Ti and 3080 Ti are much the same. But yeah, even a 3060 can do fairly well in 1440p games, so I probably wouldn't look too much above that. The 7th generation of the Legion laptop lineup is now 1 AMD and 2 months Intel overdue. What do you think is delaying their release? Yeah, couldn't really tell you. So I've been trying to follow up with Lenovo to get updates on when I'm going to get the Legion 5, Legion 7, and Legion 7 Slim. Haven't heard anything. They did recently send the IdeaPad Gaming 3, the new 2022 version, so we're testing that at the moment. But yeah, not sure about those other ones or what the issue is. So far, I've only seen AMD's Ryzen 6000 CPUs in some ASUS laptops, and pretty much nowhere else. So no one's told me this, but to me that kind of just... it's kind of obvious that AMD must be having some kind of supply issues. They just can't get enough chips out into the market, and I guess maybe ASUS had the first or the biggest order or something like that, because they seem to be the only one actually getting those processors, and yeah, I've got no idea when we'll actually see more laptops with them. As for buying the older version because of less money and perhaps more availability, yeah, I've been telling lots of people that the last year models are still good. I mentioned in all my Lenovo videos this year that, you know, while there are improvements in the Legion series, there's nothing really groundbreaking because the machines were already pretty good. Like, you know, they're not reinventing the wheel every single year. So the differences between 2021 and 2022 aren't really that big. So if you can't buy a 2022 model, I'd still be pretty satisfied with the 2021 model. Is the performance penalty of going from a 16:9 1440p screen to 16:10 1600p significant enough to matter? So I haven't really done any direct comparisons between the two resolutions, but obviously that 16:10, so the taller screen resolution, which I think is 2560 by 1600, is getting pretty popular. So it's in a few of the ASUS Zephyrus series and a few other laptops. But yeah, from what I've seen in some of those laptops that had mid-range RTX 3060 graphics, it could still run it well enough. And, you know, you got features like DLSS and FSR, which I think make it still pretty decent, as long as we're not talking about like a low 80 to 90 watt 3060. You mentioned the Legion 5 Pro, which is a max power 3060. I think it's probably okay. 6 gig of VRAM, it is a limit in some games, like Watch Dogs Legion, for example, that tries to use 8 gig as soon as you go above like high settings or something. So it could be a bit of a limit, but you know, I guess you could use lower settings for games like that if you really need to. While I think 3060 is fine for 1440p, I guess if you could spend the extra for a 3070 just to get that 8 gigs, it might be a little better. And then there's also AMD, who have the RX 6600M, which I believe has 8 gigs of VRAM. And I did a whole comparison video between the 6600M and 3060, and they were pretty close. Nvidia was better when it came to ray tracing, and of course you get DLSS, but the Radeon GPU does at least have FSR. But yeah, you can use both FSR and DLSS with Nvidia, so it still has an advantage. Will you do tech tips? Yes. Hey Jared, I have 2 questions. Which companies do you think provide better BIOS in their laptops for some tweaking? And do you reinstall Windows and uninstall bloatware before testing a laptop? By the way, love your video. Thanks. So in terms of BIOS, it's really simple. MSI's advanced BIOS just blows everything else away. Like some laptops, like the Tongfang chassis from, say, companies like Electronics or XMG, they have some extra options like memory tweaking and stuff like that, which a lot of laptops don't have. The Lenovo BIOS is okay. There's a lot of settings in there that most other laptops don't have, but to be fair, also a lot of it can be controlled through software. But yeah, then there are brands like ASUS, Gigabyte, Razer that just have pretty much very minimal customization, only the essentials. But yeah, MSI's advanced BIOS, you can change anything almost. There's so much stuff in there that I don't even know what 90% of it does, and I'm too afraid to try and change it because I don't know if I'll brick the machine. But yeah, if you want to do tweaking, definitely an MSI laptop just because of the BIOS. There's so much option in there. As for reinstalling Windows, I don't do that. However, I do uninstall the antivirus software. I don't do a fresh installation because I still want all the software ready to go, mostly because I'm lazy and that'll take a lot of time. But also, even if I was doing a fresh install, I would still be installing like all the control panel and stuff anyway. But basically from a review perspective, I want to test the machine as you would actually test it if you bought it. And honestly, I think most people probably uninstall the default antivirus that comes with a laptop anyway. So I don't think that's unfair or anything. Plus, every laptop has like a different antivirus installed anyway. So trying to fairly compare all these different products that are running different bloatware kind of becomes a bit tricky. So yeah, personally, I think just uninstalling the antivirus puts them on more of a level playing field for the purposes of the reviews and comparisons that we do. How would you go about improving thermal performance in a laptop where the CPU is locked and can't be undervolted? So there are a few things you can do. Simplest is probably just to like raise the back of the machine up just a little bit. You can put something under there if you don't have anything. Sometimes, like if I'm traveling and I've got my laptop going full blast, exporting a video, I'll just put the power brick underneath the back. But yeah, you can get stands as well. There are also cooling pads. I've done a video in the past where I compared stands, cooling pads, and vacuum coolers. Vacuum coolers kind of just like sit on the edge and they just suck the air out. The vacuum coolers didn't really help that much. The cooling pads helped the most, but compared to just like a stand that doesn't have a fan and a cooling pad, which is basically just a stand with a fan, the stand gives you most of the benefit. So basically, long story short, you get most of the gains just by lifting the back of the laptop up ever so slightly. Of course, it depends on the specific laptop design, but most of them have the air intake vents towards the back half of the machine. And, you know, air trying to get in through the side, there's not really a whole lot of space to get between the laptop under the table and into the fans. So just propping it up a little bit allows air to come in, and it's just much cooler that way. But yeah, that's probably the easiest thing that most people can do. If you've still got problems after that, might be time to replace the thermal paste. And then yeah, there are other things you can do through software, whether that be limiting power limits or lowering clock speeds, stuff like that. But yeah, for most people, seriously, just lift the back of the machine up a little bit and yeah, you probably lower the temperatures by like at least 5 degrees, maybe 10 degrees. It's pretty good for such a simple change. Long-term 1 to 2 years liquid metal for gaming laptop, good or bad? So this is a question I can't really personally answer. I've never actually applied liquid metal to any laptop. Obviously, I've tested gaming laptops that ship with liquid metal from the factory, but all of those review units, I'm pretty sure I don't have anymore, so I can't do long-term testing. because when I get a new laptop, I can only test it for like 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks at the most before it has to either go back to the company or get sent on to the next reviewer. So yeah, unfortunately, I haven't been able to do any long-term testing on, say, a laptop that's been out for 2 years that has liquid metal, let alone daily drive it enough to the point where I could confidently say, yeah, the temperatures or performance have degraded. And even if I did do that, that would just be a small sample size of one. Maybe there would be an issue in other laptops from the same year and model, or maybe they're all fine, and maybe it would be a different story if we're comparing 2 different brands of laptops who might be using 2 different types of liquid metal. There's all sorts of variables, but yeah, basically I can't really say. The only thing I can say is I would think that the companies applying liquid metal would have done some sort of testing and think that their products are going to hold up over time. Otherwise, they're just going to have to deal with RMAs and customers contacting support, which just wastes their time and money. So it's kind of in their best interest to not have issues. Yeah, I don't know if I would personally worry about it if I had a laptop with liquid metal. But then I guess there is also the counter argument. Maybe the companies have tested the liquid metal long term and, maybe it'll get you just over that warranty period. And then after that, it turns to crap. I don't know. I would definitely like to know the answer, but yeah, that's about all the information I can provide on that topic. Not exactly a question, but can you do tests on cooling pads, especially turbo ones like the GT500? Some people say it's the best laptop cooler out there. So I think this company actually reached out to me a long time ago asking if I wanted to test out their product. And I said, yeah, sure, send it over. And then they just never replied. Okay, then. Yeah, that does look like an interesting option, mostly because, well, let's be real, most cooling pads are basically the same, right? They just have a basic low power fan on it, and that one looks a bit different. I don't know if I'd get to the point where I would do dedicated review videos on a cooling pad, but I was thinking of like a big comparison video with, say, I don't know, 10 plus popular cooling pads or something like that. I have done a comparison in the past where I did stand versus 3 cooling pads and vacuum coolers, as I mentioned earlier. But yeah, going to 10 cooling pads would definitely be kind of next level. It also depends how many laptops I would be testing for that. So in that older video where I compared 3 cooling pads, I think I tested 10 laptops. So to do in-depth thermal testing on 10 laptops on 3 different cooling pads is quite a bit. So if I'm doing 10 cooling pads, I'm probably not going to want to do 10 different laptops because that would just take way too long to collect all that data. I wouldn't really be too keen on that. But yeah, it's also just going to be honest, it's kind of content that is a bit lower priority for me to make. Not because I'm not interested in it, but because it's just not really time. Like, I get sent so many laptops to review that all of my time focus is basically on getting the reviews done and then what can I compare these products to and then making dedicated comparisons. And by the time those have done, more laptops come through the door and I have to repeat the whole process. So I've got like a video idea list, which is like pages and pages long. And there's stuff like this in there, like do an updated cooling pad test. So it is definitely something I want to get to. Yeah, I don't really have time. Maybe I need to hire more people. I don't know. What laptop features do you think are just gimmicks? So the first thing that comes to mind is those laptops, well, most laptops, they'll have like stickers on them for, like different sound things, like different types of speakers. Like HP have like I think it's like Bang Olufsen or whatever. There's like Dolby stickers and there's just all kinds of different stickers for different speakers. And they all talk about how great their audio is. And 90+% of the time, the speakers are still garbage. So they always try to advertise that like their laptop speakers are great, but I've almost never found that to be the case. Times where laptop speakers are actually good, funnily enough, the laptop doesn't have any garbage stickers on it mentioning speakers. So yeah, based on that, I look at that as a bit of a gimmick. The other one would be around like military grade and that kind of thing. Like the ASUS TUF laptops, for example, I know they claim that they do all these tests and it's like military certified for like dropping a certain distance or getting dust in it and crap like that. But like, it's not stuff I can test. So yeah, because I can't test it and replicate it, I view it as a bit of a gimmick because, I don't know, is it military grade? Maybe. I don't know. I can't say. So yeah, rather than mentioning it and giving it any kind of mention, which I feel is just pushing their advertising or marketing. I just don't mention stuff like that because I just view it as a bit of a gimmick. Any performance difference between the 3070 and 3070 Ti? Yes. I'm deciding between the two, and the 3070 one is on sale. So it depends on the price difference, but I can't really fairly compare the 3070 and 3070 Ti. And that's because all 3070 Ti laptops I've had came out in 2022, which means they're paired with 2022 CPUs. So all my 3070 laptops are paired with 2021 CPUs. Now, if we're comparing higher resolutions like 1440p with higher setting presets, the CPU difference might not matter as much, but there's still enough of a difference where I haven't gone out of my way to make a dedicated comparison between the 3070 and 3070 Ti just yet. From what I have seen so far, generally the 3070 Ti is probably a bit closer to a 3080, so you could potentially look at my 3070 versus 3080 comparison that I made last year and use that, or just watch the laptop review videos where I cover 3070 Ti laptops, because I have the big game graphs and there's like 20 laptops in there, and you know, if it's a 3070 Ti laptop, I'll probably throw in some 3070 results from last year, so you could use that to kind of get a rough idea of what to expect. As someone who likes big screens, my desktop has a 27-inch monitor but has a 15-inch laptop. I was wondering if a 17-inch laptop would be a noticeable screen upgrade. So yeah, I have played games on both 15 and 17-inch gaming laptops, and I do think that 17 inches is noticeable. It does look better, that's just a fact. But yeah, obviously you have the portability trade-off, so it depends on if you care about that. Personally, like I mentioned earlier, I actually take my laptops with me, so I generally tend to preference 15-inch laptops just because there are more bags you can get that fit 15-inch laptops, and they're more portable, they don't weigh as much. But yeah, 17-inch does look better. And also, 17-inch laptops aren't actually that big anymore. This is a 17-inch laptop here, and I can actually fit it in my camera bag that was advertised as supporting up to 15 inches. And that's just because in the last couple of years, 17-inch laptops have gotten much more trimmer. So the bezels, for instance, aren't huge and gigantic like they were in the past. So although it is a 17-inch screen, it's still a bit more portable than it was even just 2 years ago. So yeah, as long as you don't mind the extra size and weight compared to the 15-inch, 17-inch is a noticeable screen upgrade. Would you consider the ASUS Zephyrus G14 or the G14 this generation? In your review, you highlighted all these little points regarding the G15 which add up to quite a lot, especially the battery life as compared to the G14. So I would appreciate if you could provide us with some even more of your detailed thoughts regarding it. I was actually considering doing a dedicated comparison between the G14 and G15. I do still have both laptops here. Don't know if ASUS forgot about them or what. So I could do a dedicated comparison if I have time. I guess let me know if anyone would be interested in that. From my perspective, obviously the G14 is more portable, and like I've said, personally, I really do like portability, but at the same time, I don't think 15 inches is exactly big or anything. It can fit in most bags that have a laptop spot. And then you also get the bigger screen, which, as I also mentioned in the last question, I think just is better for gaming. And ultimately, with smaller 14-inch designs, you're usually paying more money to get that smaller form factor, which might not perform as well. So yeah, those are the main things that come to mind. Again, if you want to see a dedicated comparison, I don't know, someone put a comment down below saying, yeah, do the G14 versus G15, and if everyone likes it and it's up the top, I'll strongly consider it. Advanced Optimus is very janky. It launches games in windowed mode sometimes, other times it just says unable to switch display modes. I have had that once, but it was with a DirectX 9 game. I think it was CSGO, and technically Advanced Optimus doesn't support that. So I guess my first thing I would mention is make sure you're using a newer, I think DirectX 11 and 12 games and Vulkan games should be fine. So as long as it's not like some super old game, it might be a bug, but yeah, that is a known issue with older games. Also, if I manually change to DGPU mode in the Nvidia control panel and switch back to Optimus, searchapp.exe still uses the 3060 and drains battery. So I'm not sure what searchapp.exe is, but yeah, if there is a process that's using one GPU and you change it, it's not really going to move the workload that's running over to the other GPU. I don't know if that's really an Optimus limitation as much as it is a Windows limitation, because some laptops, I think it's ASUS, they have their iGPU only option in the ASUS Armoury Crate software, so you can be like, only use the integrated graphics and disable the Nvidia graphics to get more battery life. And when you do that, it's like, hey, you've got these processors running on the Nvidia graphics. We have to kill these processors in order to do this swap. Are you sure you want to do it? And you can say yes or no. So I guess the problem with Advanced Optimus is maybe it doesn't have any option of being like, yeah, you've still got these things running on this GPU. Do you want to kill them? And yeah, you mentioned the only way you could fix it is to restart the laptop. I guess if you close whatever the software is or kill the process in Task Manager, it should be fine. But yeah, again, I don't know if it's really a bug. It would definitely be something they would have thought of when making it, I would imagine. Maybe they thought that that was just a better solution compared to giving the user the option to close the processors down and then open them back up on the other GPU. I think that would be a bit of an even more janky solution. Like, what if you've got a game running and you're like, oh, okay, let's do this swap. And then you're like, oh, okay, kill everything. Oh, no, there goes all my games and work. And I don't know, I'm sure someone would do it. But yeah, maybe a small video covering the bugs you face with Advanced Optimus in general. Honestly, it's not really the type of thing I would cover in a dedicated video. And yeah, apart from what I've just said, I don't know if I have a whole lot more to mention. The only other things I've found with Advanced Optimus is sometimes there are issues with the color profiles. So again, I think this is more of a Windows limitation. When you swap between the integrated graphics and discrete graphics, they might have different color profiles. I don't know if that's defined, or it probably is defined by the OEM selling the laptop. So maybe they just need to have the same color profile set for both GPU. But I remember there was one laptop I had where you could change the color profile with the iGPU, but then you didn't get the option to change it with the Nvidia graphics. So I'm not really sure. Maybe Windows just needs to be updated as well to have better support for changing between two GPUs. I don't really know who's at fault here, to be honest. It is a newer technology, to be fair, so yeah, I can only assume that these things will improve over time. And Advanced Optimus has been around for like 2 years, I think now, but we're only just starting to see it getting rolled out in current laptops. So I think that kind of tells you to some degree that they might have been facing even more issues in the past, and they're only just getting to the point where they think that it's something that is ready to go out to the general public. At least that's the impression that I get. But yeah, is it perfect? No, definitely not. But I do think it's a better solution that will improve over time. With Zen 4 and RTX 40 series in view later this year, is now a good time to buy? What are the estimated gains in the laptop market? Like I said before, if you need something now, buy now. Otherwise, you're just going to fall into the trap of waiting for the next best thing. There's always going to be something new just around the corner. It's literally how tech works. And now that I think about it, it's kind of beneficial for me, because it means I'll always have a job if there's a new CPU and GPU coming out every year. I've always got something to test. But yeah, seriously, kind of like I mentioned before, I do think now is a pretty good time to buy because we're still like 6 months until CES, which is probably when we're going to get the announcement for RTX 40 series mobile, I would expect anyway, based on the past. We had RTX 3070 Ti and 3080 Ti January this year CES, and then the January CES prior to that, we had RTX 30 series. I think we were expecting RTX 40 series for desktops to be announced before CES, but from what I've heard, it sounds like that might get pushed back to January at the same time as the laptops. I'm not really sure what the deal is there, but yeah, we're probably 6 months till the announcement, and then like I mentioned in an earlier question, after that point, it could still be like 2 or 3 months until we actually get the GPUs. And I can't really answer as to whether or not it's worth waiting for, because I have no idea what the gains are going to be. I can only assume that they would be better than what we got at the start of this year. Like the RTX 3070 Ti and 3080 Ti are kind of just filling in gaps of the existing lineup on the same architecture. So it wasn't too surprising that that didn't give us a super big performance gain or anything like that. But yeah, hopefully 40 series is a nice step up. And similar deal with Zen 4. I'm pretty sure AMD is announcing Zen 4 on the desktop side later this year. But again, I mean, they've done that in the past, and then the mobile CPU news didn't come out until like CES kind of time frame. So again, that's like 6 months away in January, so we'll just have to wait and see. When it comes down to it though, buying even a Zen 3 and RTX 30 series laptop this year is going to be able to handle anything for years to come, I'd say. Are gaming laptops real? No, this whole channel is a lie. Another question asking about the G14 and G15. Again, let me know if I should compare them in depth. So you mentioned games and 3D modeling differences and which would I recommend. Honestly, for that, probably the G15 just because it has the Nvidia graphics. From most of the 3D modeling tests and creator workloads that I've looked at, generally speaking, Nvidia just seems to have better support, and yeah, it's just more widely adopted, especially in 3D modeling work. Like there are a lot more software suites that have support for like CUDA and optics that just perform better objectively with Nvidia. When it comes to gaming, I could go either way, but again, Nvidia does technically have better ray tracing support, and you also get DLSS. Obviously, the G14 has FSR, but you can use FSR on Nvidia too. So yeah, the Nvidia option in the G15 kind of just feels like you're getting the best of both worlds. I want a laptop buying guide for different price points like $500, $1,000, $1,500, $2K. You and everyone else. So I would love to do these types of videos. Let's be real, everyone wants to see this type of content, and the videos would perform fantastically. If video performs really well, I get a lot of views, I get more subscribers, and let's just be honest, I earn more money. So it's in my best interest to make content like this. The problem is, I want to do it well, and right now, I just can't do it well. Almost every single laptop I've been sent this year has either 3070 Ti or 3080 Ti graphics, which is basically at the top end of this price range. So I just can't really do most of those price ranges if companies aren't sending me laptops that have those specs. It's really annoying, but it is what it is. Like, I only got my first 3060 laptop this year, like a month ago or something, so halfway through the year, and that was because I bought it with my own money, because I was sick of getting the high-end options, and I know you guys wanted to see some more mid-range stuff. So yeah, I would love to do stuff like this. It's just super hard. And also when you're asking for stuff like $500, I don't think I've ever seen a brand new gaming laptop for less than like $600. So that is also extremely limited. But yeah, around the $1,000 price point, I'd love to cover more. It's just really hard to get, especially being here in Australia. I can only buy what is available in my country. So there are a lot of nice deals on Best Buy around that price point, but I just can't get any of the laptops here. It's unfortunate, but yeah, kind of is what it is. Hopefully it changes in future. Like that first question was about, all the inflationary stuff and things costing more. Hopefully things go down over time and I can get them, and I would really love to do some videos like this. What are your expectations on mobile versions of RTX 40 series? Probably like 30 series, but 10 times better. Because 30, 40, it's 10 numbers higher. But seriously, I've really got no idea. Like, I think I've seen rumors and stuff posted on news sites. I might have seen something on Twitter, I can't remember. I just don't pay any attention to any of that stuff because I'm just so focused and busy on the stuff that's here today and testing that I don't have time to think about what might be coming. But yeah, I haven't seen anything or heard anything official about this. If I had, I wouldn't be able to share it, for one thing. Yeah, I really don't know what to expect. 30 series, but better is my best guess. I really hope we see more VRAM, like if we get a 4060. I've said in this video that I think 6 gigs is okay for the 3060 at 1440p, but yeah, 8 gigs would be a better sweet spot, especially if it's a laptop you're still going to be using in 3 or 4 years. So I think 40 series, I think it's going to have to be a necessity that the 4060 goes up to 8 gigs, and if they don't, then I'm probably going to have some concerns, given that a 4060 laptop probably isn't going to come out until 2023. And then if it's got 6 gigs and we've got 1440p screens becoming way more popular, 4-5 years after that, 2028, we're still using 6 gigs of VRAM for high resolution gaming, probably not going to be ideal. So yeah, I guess that's the only expectation I have, is that the 4060 increases the VRAM. If not, then, well, might be a little rough. If you had to pick a laptop to be your daily driver, would it be a so-called gaming laptop or a regular office/business laptop, and which one would it be? So I actually have a couple of different laptops that I use depending on the purpose. So right now, this Aero 17 is the laptop that I use, though I am in the process of changing that, so stay tuned. And I take that when I go to anywhere where I need CPU and GPU power. So the main reason I wanted something like this is for editing videos on the go when I go to events like CES or Computex. But just being realistic, I haven't traveled for any events for like 2 years now, due to human malware. So I haven't really actually needed it. And right before that happened, I also bought a 12.5-inch Xiaomi laptop. So that has like a dual-core Celeron processor or something like that in it, just because it was really cheap and I wanted something nice and thin and portable that I could just like throw in my bag, don't care about it. If I want to watch some YouTube videos on something a bit bigger than a phone screen, then I could use that and I wouldn't have to carry a big 17-inch laptop around with a larger power brick. But yeah, again, I haven't really done much travel, so I haven't really needed that. These days, rather than picking some underpowered garbage Windows laptop, honestly, I'd probably just go for the MacBook Air. So I do actually have a MacBook Air sitting over there, not the new 2022 model, unfortunately, but I did buy a MacBook Air to use for voiceover work. So all my videos, when I'm not on camera, but you can hear me talking, I'm talking into a microphone just over there, which is plugged into the MacBook Air. And the reason for that is just because the MacBook Air doesn't have any fans, and I've got the laptop literally sitting right below the microphone. And let's be realistic, if I was running a Windows laptop, pretty much all of them come with fans, and the fans would kick on at some point. So yeah, for me, the MacBook Air was the best choice for that. But just using the MacBook Air for that work, and how small and portable it is, I think I'd just take that with me if I was going on like a short trip for a few days or something and I didn't need CPU or GPU power. The battery life is excellent and the performance on battery is great. I think it's probably the best choice for most people that don't need a so-called gaming laptop. But yeah, I do need the gaming laptop for CPU and GPU power just for rendering, but that's me and the workloads that I use. So I've been reviewing laptops for a while, and I remember when Nvidia Studio actually came out, and we started getting these types of laptops that were more designed for content creators in mind. So that's something I would personally use, but I'm kind of bunching them together there because, gaming laptop, content creator laptop, at the end of the day, they both have fairly powerful discrete graphics. So I'm kind of including both of those in the same sort of category when I'm talking about that. Because yeah, I would focus on a creator laptop rather than a gaming laptop for my work, generally because they have just better screens and stuff like that. Water break.
Refreshing.
Will it be possible for you to provide us with some durability feedbacks on the gaming laptops? Like, what will it become after 1 to 2 years of use? So like I mentioned earlier, most of the laptops I get sent back, so I don't get to keep them. But even if I do, there are some machines that I have had for a long time. Like, I still have laptops that I personally bought from like 4 or 5 years ago. Unfortunately, I can't really talk about those in terms of this either, even though I have had them, because like I've got so many laptops, there's only so much stuff I can actually use day to day. So it's just not possible for me to have all these machines that are like regularly used. And, there might be a problem that I would notice if I used a machine every other day for like a year or two. But yeah, there's only one of me and there's too many laptops, basically, is the short answer to that. It would be very good and useful information, but at the same time, even if I do have a problem, I'm just a small sample size of one person and one machine. So even if I have a problem, it might not represent what most people experience, and the other way. Maybe a lot of people have some critical issue, but then I never have it. So yeah, it's just unfortunate. Do you think that the ambient temp of the room matters? Long story short, yes. Basically, for every 1 degree Celsius that the room temperature increases, you can expect the same inside your machine. So if my room temp is 20 degrees and I'm running it 80 degrees in here, and then my room goes up to 30 degrees, then generally the inside of this would go up to 90 degrees in the same workload. Now, there are some exceptions to that. Say this laptop had a thermal throttle limit of 85 degrees Celsius, but we've gone up 10 degrees in the room. So this would go up 5 degrees and then it would start thermal throttling. So although the software would say, oh, we're at 85 degrees and we're not going any higher, the room temperature continuing to go up, but the laptop temperature staying the same would mean the thermal throttle on the laptop gets worse. So the clock speeds and performance would continually get worse while the room temperature goes up. Now, I can't actually say how much of a difference that would make, but it is something that I have wanted to test for a long time. But it's another one of those videos that is just going to take an obscene amount of work, and it's like in my to-do list of stuff that I'll get to one day, hopefully. But yeah, it would be so cool to test out like 10 different laptops in a room, say between like 18 degrees Celsius and 30 degrees Celsius. Just have this range, and in 1 degree increments, do CPU plus GPU stress tests and see how it affects clock speeds, see how it affects game FPS. I just think it would be so cool to see how much thermal throttling actually matters at different room temp limits. But yeah, it's a ton of work. So hopefully I can get to that one day. This is just another example of what I was talking about. It just seems like there's some notion out there that people think laptops are just designed to like die after 6 to 12 months or something. I don't know, but yeah, any laptop should last for years as long as you treat it with respect. Obviously, there are some things that will die. There are failure rates and different tolerances and all sorts of things. Nothing's perfect. That's why there's warranties and stuff like that. But yeah, generally speaking, there's no reason that this laptop, your laptop, as long as you treat it with respect, shouldn't last for 4 to 5 years, or until the hardware becomes either obsolete or no longer does what you need to do anymore to the point where you need to upgrade. And yeah, you mentioned 8 to 10 hours of use daily. When I was at my old job before I started this channel, I left my laptop on pretty much 24/7. So I was a penetration tester, basically do security testing for websites, and I would have it doing automated scanning from a bunch of different virtual machines. And yeah, I would just leave the laptop on all the time, and it was perfectly fine after 3.5 years. Are you planning on adding Valorant along with CSGO and Rainbow Six for your testing? No.
Rant mode activated.
So we did actually give Valorant a try. I was going to include it in one of the game benchmark videos a few months back, but we just found that there was too much inconsistency in the FPS data coming out of it. And that was even trying like the practice range or whatever it is. So I can't use the actual game because we can't, consistently do the exact same test run because it's just not feasible, when there's people trying to kill you in the game. So yeah, I tried the test range or whatever it is, and we just found it was too inconsistent. And then when you uninstall it, it was so difficult to uninstall the game client. And there was all this garbage running in the background for like anti-cheat stuff. And I was concerned about it affecting other benchmarks that we needed to run. And yeah, there was just too many negatives for it to be worth it. And at the end of the day, like those other games, CSGO and Rainbow Six, do you need to see me showing every single laptop running Valorant at like 5,000 billion FPS? Is that going to tell you anything? If the game runs on a potato anyway, I don't think it really matters.
Rant over.
AMD 5800, 6800, or should we wait for 7000 series and the small increase in cores/performance? Again, like I've said before, I don't really know what's coming in the future. Have heard some rumors that 7000 might have more cores and threads, and you'd kind of hope so, given the big jump that Intel 12th gen has gotten this generation by having P and E cores. So if AMD increases their core count, that would be pretty good. Actually, I think the rumor was something like a 16-core mobile chip. That would be pretty crazy given they have a 8-core 16-thread chip at the moment. So that would basically be doubling what they've got. And if they did that, I'd be pretty impressed. And yeah, Zen 4, it could be interesting, but again, we're probably not going to get announcements of that until like January at CES. As for Intel 13th gen, you're probably right on that. Again, 12th gen was already a pretty huge jump over 11th gen. 13th gen, from my understanding, probably a little single core boost. And I think on the top end SKUs, they're adding more E-cores. So maybe a bit more multi-threaded performance. I think the rumor I saw was like a 25% boost or something. So maybe if you're smashing the CPU, 13th gen could be worth it. But yeah, I think the bigger jump next generation will be Ryzen 6000 to 7000, assuming they are doubling the core count, because that's just going to be a bigger change between 12th gen and 13th gen, which I think was meant to be like an extra 4 E-cores or something. So not nothing, especially given Intel was keeping us on quad cores for years until only like just a few years ago now. So yeah, I'll definitely take it. As a second, is 3070/6700M worth it, or should we wait for 4060/7600M? So again, like I mentioned before, I don't really know about what's coming with the GPU stuff, and ultimately I think it depends on whether or not you need something now. Because if you want to wait, you're probably going to be waiting for like 7+ months just to hear the news, and then extra time for when the products will actually be available. And who knows if anything in the world will happen that causes issues with production and availability, and then maybe prices end up going high, maybe cryptocurrency mining comes back, I don't know, there are so many variables. After the release of the Nvidia RTX 4000 GPUs, how long do we have to wait for them to get into laptops? So I kind of talked about this in a few of the other questions, but yeah, it could be 2 to 3 months would be my guess, just based on what we've seen recently with RTX 30 series. but also we need to acknowledge that we might not see it in all versions of laptops for many, many months. Again, take for example the Lenovo Legion 5 or Legion 7. Those were announced in January and it's now July and we still have absolutely no idea when they're coming. So although the new GPUs and CPUs have been available for some time, it's up to those companies and when they actually have their laptops ready and when they're able to get enough allocation from companies like Nvidia to get enough chips to actually put into their machines. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing they probably get different levels of priority based on how many they're buying. So larger companies like your ASUS and MSI might be able to get them earlier than others. So yeah, it'll depend. Yeah, another question about the temperatures. Is it okay or normal for gaming laptops to run with a high temperature for extended periods of time? Yeah, I think so. The machine will throttle back if it needs to. It'll take care of itself. There's not really too much you need to worry about, unless it's like thermal throttling hardcore and you're losing a lot of performance. As for what temperature is all right, if we're talking like combined CPU and GPU workloads, so like, pushing it fairly hard, anywhere between like 80 degrees Celsius and 100 degrees Celsius, I think is pretty standard stuff. Nvidia GPUs thermal throttle at like 87 degrees Celsius. So if you're on 87, maybe look into that. But as long as the Nvidia GPU is below that, you're probably all good. And a lot of CPUs thermal throttle at 90, 95, maybe 100 degrees Celsius. Again, it depends on the company and what limits they've set for their laptop. But sometimes you can configure that yourself. Some laptops, like I think it was Alienware and maybe ASUS, no, XMG, in their control center software, they have TCC offset available. You can basically set the thermal throttle threshold limit through BIOS or software. So say you have TCC offset set to 5. The thermal throttle limit of the CPU might be 95 degrees Celsius, but with TCC offset set to 5, the throttle limit will be 90 degrees Celsius. So if you set TCC offset to 10, then the thermal throttle limit would drop to 10 below 95, which would be 85. So it depends on the laptop, but yeah, there are some instances where you can have some level of control over what temperatures it actually runs at if you're super paranoid about temperatures. Obviously, the downside of doing that is you'll get lower performance in most cases, because to actually use more power, you need to run with higher temperatures to get that performance. It's a bit of a trade-off. What is the difference between Ryzen 7K and Ryzen 6K? And does the difference make it worth waiting? So yeah, just another example of, I don't really know what's coming, but yeah, if we do get that 16-core Ryzen chip, it could be interesting. I suppose it just depends on, how much your workloads actually benefit from multi-core performance, if that's the move they're going with. Because let's be real, 8 cores, 16 threads is still plenty for all the games today. You're not going to really see much benefit in most cases going up to something like 16 cores. Even if it was 12 cores, most people just don't need that unless you're doing like non-gaming tasks and you're doing rendering or video editing or something like that, then it might be worthwhile. I guess for gaming, if there are actually good single-threaded or cache improvements with Ryzen 7000, then it could make more of a difference for gaming. But again, we don't have the specs just yet, so we'll have to wait and see. Is cleaning your laptop from within once a year enough, and should you get extended warranty on a laptop? So yeah, I think if you're using the laptop all the time, once a year is probably fine. It also depends on your environment and just like how dusty your room is. If you live in a dirty place or, there's like lots of dust in the air and other stuff, then, or you have pets, for example, more stuff in the air means more stuff getting sucked through the fans. So you might have to clean it more regularly. If you're not sure, maybe after 6 months of a lot of use, you could just take the bottom panel off, have a quick look inside, see if you need to do anything. If it looks pretty gross, give it a clean. If it looks fine, then just put the bottom panel back on. As for extended warranty, I guess, sometimes I consider it a bit of a scam. Sometimes, maybe it's the thing that saves you from having to spend tons of money getting something repaired. Yeah, ultimately, I think it depends on your risk tolerance and whether or not you want to spend the money to have that peace of mind that you've got that, I guess, little bit of extra security. So I think that's a very personal thing, and it's really up to you. Personally, I've never spent money on extended warranty, but that's me. In a gaming laptop, what is often underestimated or overestimated? So I think something that's overestimated, which I might partly be to blame for, is perhaps a mux switch. So I have shown in many videos that a mux switch will improve gaming performance, especially in esports games. But as many laptops are starting to get higher resolution screens, with 1440p becoming very normal, and even 4K high refresh options now here, the mux switch kind of starts mattering less and less, because once you get to those higher resolutions, especially if you're playing with high GPU settings, the workload is so GPU bound that it doesn't really matter if you're sending so few frames between the discrete graphics and integrated graphics to get to the screen. So yeah, it depends on what you're doing and the games you're playing, but you know, at 1440p, in a lot of games, unless you're playing esports titles, mux switch isn't really that important. Don't get me wrong, it does give you a boost and it's a nice feature, but yeah, it's not critical, but also it is now in a lot of machines, so yeah. For 1440p gaming though, I could probably take it or leave it, because, you know, I play games like Watch Dogs, Control, Assassin's Creed. Those types of things are generally GPU heavy anyway, so it's not really going to matter. As for underestimated, I think I asked my partner about this just before I filmed this video, and she said something I agreed with, which was fan noise. So I don't think a lot of people consider how loud the laptop actually is, like when just sitting there doing nothing. So like right now, this laptop is basically idle. I'm just using it to view these questions. And the fan is very quiet. Like sitting here, I can't notice it until I put my ear next to it. And you know, if I'm like in a library or something, perfectly acceptable. But I have had other laptops where the fans will either, you know, ramp up and down constantly, even when you're not doing anything, or they'll just consistently stay loud and you can't do anything. And yeah, I think that is underestimated, because it's something that will annoy you and it'll annoy other people around you if you're using your laptop near other people. Does disabling integrated graphics from Device Manager the same as using a mux switch for laptops who don't have that feature? No. Basically, disabling in Device Manager doesn't physically change how the screen is connected to the graphics. In fact, when I did test this years ago, I found it to be much more unstable, because I guess Windows is like, hey, what's going on here? I'm trying to run this workload on the GPU and this isn't the right one and I don't know what's going on. So yeah, don't do that. Is the performance gain of Core i9 worth it over the Core i7 in thin and lights? So I actually have a video coming soon comparing the i7 and i9. I think I titled it something like, is i9 a scam? So stay tuned for that, because I test both CPUs at different power limits to represent both a thin and light machine and a high-performing gaming laptop, I suppose. But basically the summary is, unless you need single-threaded performance or you're playing esports games, just stick to the i7. The i9 isn't worth the money. At least assuming we're talking about laptops here, which we are because you mentioned thin and lights, because the i7 and i9 have the same core and thread count when it comes to laptops, but with desktops, it's a bit different. You actually get more cores and threads with i9 on the desktop side. So yeah, you would get better multi-threaded CPU performance based on that. Is it a good idea to use an external monitor with a gaming laptop? I think so. Again, especially if you don't have a mux switch, connecting an external screen to a port that connects directly to the discrete graphics will bypass Optimus and give you that same speed boost in games. But not only that, if you've got like a smaller laptop, like a 13 or 14 inch, even a 15 inch, I think is kind of borderline if you're playing games all day, just having a much bigger 24 or 27 inch screen with better refresh rate and resolution, it's the way to go. If you've got the desk space, seriously, just get a good monitor and plug it in when you're at home and you'll have a much better time. And that also means if you've got a laptop screen that, you know, might have poor color gamut, might not be very bright, might not have the best response time, you can always upgrade to an external screen later that has much better specs, so worth considering too. Is it still fine buying 2021 laptops with the discounts instead of new 2022 laptops? Absolutely yes. There are some great 2021 models still out there. Like I mentioned earlier, Lenovo's Legion series, for instance. We still can't get the Legion 5 or Legion 7 just yet for 2022, but the 2021 models are still out there, and I've seen some pretty good sales on them. Those 2021 models, you know, I said they were some of the best things available last year, and the improvements they're offering this year aren't actually that great, because I guess don't fix what's not broken, right? So they've already got a pretty good gaming laptop. They're not going to be changing too much this generation, especially when it comes to Ryzen, because the difference between AMD's Ryzen 5000 and 6000 I haven't seen to be that big, either in or outside of gaming. Intel 11th gen to 12th gen, that jump is a bit bigger. The difference in single and multi-threaded performance for CPU workloads is quite substantial. So if you're doing workloads that would benefit from CPU power, that would be a main reason I would consider a 2022 laptop. But the differences in gaming isn't that big. So if you're just gaming, then yeah, you definitely can still look at last year's models. They're still quite decent. Because, again, referring back to some of the other questions, we might be getting Nvidia's RTX 40 series graphics next year, but we've had 30 series all of this year, so all of 2022 so far, and all of 2021. So we're getting to the end of 30 series, I guess, but my point is we've had 30 series both in 2021 and 2022. So the tier of laptop GPUs has basically remained the same. The architecture's been the same. All we got this year was 3070 Ti and 3080 Ti. So yeah, from a gaming perspective, 2021 models, definitely fine. Is it possible to run games at still high frame rates with less fan noise? So yeah, there are a few things you can do with that. It might depend on the laptop, but sometimes if you put a cooling pad underneath, the laptop will detect that, well, there's more airflow because the temperatures are running lower. So the laptop's fans will actually lower. Obviously, adding the cooling pad does add some fan noise because the cooling pad has its own fans, but usually they don't spin super fast. So having the cooling pad and improving cooling might make the fan speed of the laptop get lower. And again, like I mentioned earlier, you might not necessarily need to even have a cooling pad. Just having a stand to lift the laptop up a little bit like that will probably give you most of the benefit. So doing that might also make it run quieter. It depends on the laptop though. Some also have fan control through the software, so you could try and turn down the fan speed through the software. The downside of that is the internal temperatures might get a bit warmer, which could result in less performance if there's thermal throttling, or maybe the laptop might actually feel warmer to the touch, and that just might be uncomfortable. There are also software features like Nvidia's Whisper mode. I haven't actually looked into it too much, but I believe it basically tries to run a quieter system and it will cap the frame rate to something you specify, I think between like 30 and 60 FPS. So you can definitely still get a good gaming experience, but the hardware is not running flat out as fast as it can to produce as many frames as possible, basically. So yeah, capping the frame rate should make the CPU and GPU not work as hard. Maybe, the game isn't quite as good if you've got like a 144 Hz, 165 Hz, or 240 Hz screen or something like that, and you're running it at like, 30 to 60 FPS. But, in some AAA games, like say Assassin's Creed, you don't need to be running at like 100 plus FPS to have a good time. So yeah, you could definitely cap the frame rate there and just have the machine probably running a bit quieter because yeah, it won't be getting as hot. Can you make a comparison between DDR5 and DDR4 RAM? I can. I'm just waiting for XMG. So they basically told me that they should be able to get me the exact same laptop chassis, so same CPU, same GPU, same cooling. Only difference will be one uses DDR4 memory and the other DDR5, and I'm waiting for that so I can fairly do this comparison. I haven't seen anyone do it to the degree that I want to do it just yet. I've seen some laptops where they have the same chassis, but they have a different GPU, so you can't fairly test gaming. So you could fairly test CPU workloads like, Cinebench, Blender, V-Ray, that type of thing. But yeah, when it comes to gaming, I haven't seen that done fairly. So basically, I'm just waiting to get the correct hardware so I can do this as fairly as possible. So yeah, I guess make sure you're subscribed for that one. Laptops usually ship with antivirus applications. Problem is, however, that most of these, if not all, antivirus programs are just resource hog for the entire system, barely doing anything. How much performance is being held back by newer antivirus options on laptops, both for content creation and gaming performance-wise? So this isn't something I've actually tested, but I included the question because it was actually a video idea that I had in the shower the other day. So I mentioned in another question earlier that we just uninstall the antivirus just to keep everything on a level playing field. Maybe a lot of people don't do that, but even if they don't, I thought it would be interesting to see, pick like the top 10 antivirus, for instance, compare game FPS with and without it installed. Maybe do that on an AMD and a Ryzen laptop, see what the differences are. And then I could use, there are websites where you can like upload malware or viruses and stuff, and it will show you like which antiviruses actually found it. So perhaps I could use something like that and work out which software suites are actually good at detecting threats, and then, use a mixture of that with my performance benchmarks and maybe give some general recommendations around antivirus. I don't know, it's just an idea at this point because that would be a lot of testing work. Yeah, for most people, honestly, I think just running Windows Defender does the job. As long as you're not going out of your way and downloading dodgy things, Windows Defender is going to be just fine for most people. Hey, what brand of gaming laptop do you think is the most reliable and lasts the longest with heavy gaming usage? Kind of goes back to the questions I answered earlier, like why do people think that laptops are just designed to, or not designed to, but will just die after like a year or two? That's just not a thing. If you treat the laptop well, it should last fine. Anyway, I also wanted to say that I don't have an answer for this. I really think brands are capable of making both good products and garbage products. So I wouldn't want to say like one brand is better than the other because it depends entirely on the actual models of laptop that those brands are creating. So I would be more interested in comparing individual laptops rather than just making a general sweeping statement about brands as a whole. I bought a Dell G14 with 5800H and 3050 Ti. Will I increase my overall gaming performance if I change my 16 gig RAM 3200 MHz to 32 gig RAM 2666 MHz? In most cases, no, probably not. So from my own testing, 16 gigs of RAM is still a great sweet spot when it comes to gaming. 32 gigs isn't really going to help, but what will make a difference is the speed of the memory. So going from 3200 to 2666 will probably lower the frame rates by a little bit. If you do need the extra capacity though for other applications, like say video editing, then yeah, maybe it's worth making that trade-off to get the extra capacity and then accepting that the memory will be a bit slower for gaming. But yeah, in terms of just talking about gaming performance, just stick to the 3200 memory. That will probably perform better in games. Is OLED the future for gaming laptops? So I wanted to include this one because we just got MSI's GE67 with 1440p 240Hz OLED, and man, that thing is pretty impressive. So I measured the screen response time the other day, and it was something ridiculous, like 0.6 milliseconds. So just for context, before that, the fastest result I'd ever had was like 3.5 milliseconds. So that is quite a bit faster. Now, that said, although it is nice, unless you're doing like hardcore esports competitive stuff, you're probably not really going to benefit from that level of screen response time anyway, and there are other downsides with OLED. I guess before we get to the downsides, OLED does just, in my opinion, objectively look better. Generally, the colors are just nicer, and you obviously get those deeper blacks because when an OLED screen is black, the pixels are off. So yeah, I think it looks nicer, and usually they can get brighter, not always the case, but generally the OLED screens I've tested are more like in the 500 nit range, while most gaming laptops are probably more like 300 nits. There are obviously exceptions to that, but just generally speaking. Big thing around OLED, of course, is burn-in. Now, a lot of the panel companies do say that they've made improvements over the last few years, and while that may be true, it's hard to say. Like, unless I set a laptop up and just sit it in the corner and leave the same image on it for a long time, I can't really say. And even if I do that, that's not really representative of real world use. So maybe I would just have to like actually daily drive one for some period of time. And even if I did that, I would still personally be looking to do things like hiding the taskbar in Windows, because just having those static elements, it's just not going to be ideal. But yeah, I'm sure burn-in probably does still exist to some degree, but a lot of laptops do also have mitigations against it. On that MSI GE67 laptop, I didn't really see any of those mitigations in place. ASUS laptops, on the other hand, seem to have quite a few options in the software that make it clear that they're there to help with prevent OLED burn-in. So they have things like pixel shift, where it'll move the screen, by like a few pixels over time, stuff like that. They also have things where they don't have it get as bright. and like better battery settings so that like the screen will turn off after a few minutes of inactive use by default. Just stuff like that. But yeah, I didn't really see any similar options on the MSI machine. So those kind of mitigations will also depend on like a per laptop basis. And yeah, it depends on whether or not, say, ASUS or MSI or whoever is actually putting in these methods in software to try and reduce burn-in. OLED definitely looks good, but is it the future? I want to say yes, but that burn-in is just kind of inherent with the technology. So maybe some other panel option that takes the benefits of OLED without the negatives. That would probably be the future, but I don't know when we'll be seeing that. Is RTX 3050 enough for gaming? So we're actually testing a 3050 Ti laptop at the moment, and even with DLSS, it's kind of struggling in a lot of games at high settings, obviously ultra settings too. But yeah, as long as you're cool with 1080p low to medium settings, I think it's enough. Yeah, if you're running like modern AAA games, high settings is going to be a bit of a struggle, even with DLSS. So it's definitely enough in caps, as you've asked. If you can save up a little more to a 3060, I would suggest it, especially if it's a machine that you're going to use for like 3, 4, 5 years. Now, I get that's a few extra $100 and maybe you can't afford it, but if you can save up, I would definitely recommend it for something that you're going to be playing games on for years to come. Which laptop companies have the best driver download support? Because with my Alienware, whenever I download a driver, it breaks something. That's basically my experience too. So I couldn't actually think of any laptops where I think this is obviously better than the others. Maybe Lenovo, because they have their Advantage software and all the updates come through there, and I've never had any problems installing through there, and it will do the BIOS and everything. Whereas other laptops like MSI, for the BIOS, you have to put it on a USB stick and boot into the BIOS and install it, and it's just more work for people that don't know what they're doing. So Lenovo makes that easier. But then you get others like ASUS, who also do that the automatic way through software. But then the problem is with ASUS is, you know, they have different softwares with different updates. So you can update a bunch of software through Armory Crate, but then other software like the BIOS is done through My ASUS, and it's just kind of all over the place. Whereas Lenovo is just that one software suite. Yeah, probably Lenovo in terms of one of the better ones. And yeah, Alienware is definitely one of the worst ones out there. It's beyond a joke. Seriously, they just need to rewrite their whole software from scratch, in my opinion. They just have so many different packages that don't work with each other, and different ones update at different times, and man, it's just a big mess. I've wasted way too much time troubleshooting their stuff. Is an i7 7700HQ 1050 Ti laptop still good for gaming? So I actually bought a 1050 Ti laptop, though it was with a i5 7300HQ. So the CPU just before this, and it was like $260 US. So it was the cheapest laptop I could find on eBay. So I'm about to find out whether or not it can still play games in 2022, so make sure you're subscribed for that content. What's the best OS for gaming? Thanks. Windows when it comes down to it. So I do actually have a Tongfang laptop here from Tuxedo Computers. So they sell Tongfang-based laptops, kind of like XMG and electronics, but they give you the option of shipping it with Linux. And the one I've got, it has dual boot with Linux and Windows. So my plan was to do kind of a Windows versus Linux game benchmark comparison, and also just talk about the general differences between, you know, getting going with Linux versus Windows for like installing games and other software things, just all that kind of differences. But that said, Linus Tech Tips did actually already do a very good series comparing Windows and Linux. So check that out if you haven't seen it already. But personally for me, best OS today for gaming, I'd just go with Windows 11 and forget about it. What do you think about RTX 2050? So I did a video on this when it was announced last year. I think it was last year, this was like 7 months ago. I've only just now seen 2050 laptops become available. So on YouTube, if you search for 2050 benchmarks, you can find some. I was very close to pulling the trigger and buying one to see how it compared to, say, a 3050, but I don't think I'm going to bother just now. And the reason for that is, so far, I've only seen it in like Ultrabook style machines, you know, the type of things we would traditionally see, either integrated graphics or maybe Nvidia's MX series. I haven't actually seen it in any gaming laptops though, so if it's not going to be available in any gaming laptops to buy, then there's probably no point in me spending $1,000 or whatever it is to get one to benchmark. Now, if I'm wrong and there is a gaming laptop with a 2050, please do let me know and I'll give it another look. But for now, yeah, I think it's probably not something that most of my audience who's interested in games needs to look at. Well, that's going to do it for now. Most people don't get this far in the video, so thanks for watching if you did make it. If you're still here, put in green potato omelette in the comments so I know. There were quite a few questions asking about the differences between Intel and AMD CPUs this generation. I did my best to answer that in this video, but if you do actually want to see the differences, then check out this video over here next. And if you're new to the channel, thanks for watching, and make sure you get subscribed for future Q&A videos like this one. Or if you don't want to wait, come and join me in Patreon and support the channel, and you can join our Discord community and ask your questions anytime.